Oh, hello. How you doing? I was just playing this little machine. It's a bit out of a musical box. Can you hear the sound it makes? It's very quiet when I hold it in my hand, but when I set it on the table, it gets louder and louder. I've got lots of these. Maybe I'll come in and show you them sometime. Anyway, hope you're all keeping well, because today I've got another sound story for you. A story where you have to help me make all the sounds of things that happen in the story. So I hope you're ready for that. I need to waken up a bit before I start, so maybe you'll waken up with me. Good. Can you waken up your hair like this? Copy me. Can you waken up your cheeks like this? Can you waken up your nose? One finger on your nose and give it a wiggle. You'll be doing lots of listening, so can you give your ears a wiggle? That's good. Put your hands out and wiggle your fingers like you're playing the piano very quietly. Play a little louder with your whole hand. And then you can play with your whole arms like you're playing really loud, angry music. Dong, dong, da, dong, 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 da, dong, da, dong. That's enough. Thank you. I think you're woken up now. We'll also need to practice some of the sounds. This is a sound that is in the story. Can you do that? Wobble your lips like a horse. Another sound that is in the story is the sound of logs crackling on a fire. Have you ever heard that sound? Logs crackle and pop when they're burning on a fire. A bit like if we all clapped our hands, but not all at the same time. Can you do that with me? Not all at the same time. And if you listen, it's just like logs crackling in a fire. We'll also need to make the sound of heavy rain on a roof. So can you clap your knees like that? All together, everybody. It sounds a bit like rain on a roof. And of course, we're going to need our shakers for this story too, because guess what? In the middle of the story, there's a train journey. So get your shakers ready, but don't play them yet. I'll tell you when to play them. Okay, are we sitting comfortably? Are we listening? Are we ready to start? Good. Let's say once upon a time together. Can you say it with me? Watch my mouth and see if we can say it at exactly the same time. Ready? Once upon a time, there was a little dog called Sniffy. Here he is. Hi, Sniffy. Wave at Sniffy. Sniffy, like all dogs, found his way around by, that's right, have a sniff, Sniffy. Can you make that sound? Sniffing sound. Sniffy, like all dogs, found his way about by sniffing. He lived in the city. He was a city dog. He lived in a flat with an old lady right in the middle of a city called Edinburgh. Every morning, the little old lady who looked after him would open her front door and let him go out for a walk. But first of all, of course, she'd feed him some lovely, delicious breakfast, which he'd eat out of his bowl. And of course, when he was at the old lady's house, he would sleep curled up in a lovely, comfy basket. This particular morning, the morning of our story, he'd done all that. He'd gotten up out of his comfy basket. He'd had his delicious breakfast. And the little old lady opened the front door to let him out into the street. Sniffy sniffed his way down the stairs. Can you sniff with me? He sniffed his way out the front door, along a little lane, down a main street, right onto Princess Street Gardens, which is one of the biggest streets in Edinburgh. He looked carefully both ways and crossed the road into Princess Gardens, which was a huge big park. In the park that morning, like every morning, there were lots of children playing on their way to school. There was other dogs just sniffing. And usually Sniffy would have a sniff around and then sniff his way back home to the old lady's flat. But on this morning, Sniffy, when he was sniffing through the park, sniffed a smell that was so smelly. He just had to follow it to find out what it was. So he sniffed his way right along Princess Street, down Waverley Bridge. Can you do the sniffing sound with me? He sniffed his way down a little ramp into Waverley train station. He sniffed his way right along the platform, jumped onto a train, sniffed his way along a carriage until before he knew it, he heard this sound. The doors of the train closed behind him. Can you make that sound with me? Clunk. Sniffy was stuck on the train. And before he knew it, the train was starting to move. So can you get your shaker ready and do the moving of the train with me? Remember, just shake when I hit the guitar because they start so slowly. Ready? The train got faster and faster as it started to move away from Waverley Station. Sniffy didn't know what to do, so he just hid under a seat and closed his eyes tight, tight, tight. Before he knew it, he'd fallen fast asleep. But the train didn't stop, it just kept on going. It went through tunnels where it got all dark. And out the other side, it went up hills, getting slower and slower and slower. It went down hills really, really fast. When Sniffy woke up, there was no one else on the train. He jumped up onto a seat and looked out the big window. He could see trees and rivers and forests and mountains. Sniffy was a city dog. He'd never been in the countryside before, so he was really, really excited at what he saw. Sniffy decided when the train stopped, he'd get out and have a look around. The train started to slow down. Then it stopped. The big doors opened. Can you do that sound with me? Clunk. And Sniffy sneaked out from under the seat where he was hiding and jumped off the train onto the platform. The train doors closed behind him. Clunk. And the train sped off. Bye-bye, train. It got quieter and quieter until eventually Sniffy couldn't hear the train anymore. And when he stood on the platform, listening and looking, he heard a sound that he'd never heard before. It was this. Close your eyes. Remember this sound? It's a sound I make with rice inside my big drum. That's right, it's the sea. When Sniffy turned round, he saw that the railway station where he got off the train was right beside the sea. Oh, he'd never seen the sea before in his life, so he decided to go and have a look. Sniffy ran down from the railway station towards the sea. He jumped in the water and went, "Ah, yikes, it's so cold!" So he ran away back up to the railway line. He went over a little bridge over the railway line and found himself in a field. Ooh, interesting, thought Sniffy. So he sniffed his way through the field until he heard a strange sound. It was moo. Can you do that sound too? Moo. What on earth are those? Sniffy had never seen cows before, so he ran through the cow field into the next field where he saw these strange big animals that went. Can you make that sound? That's right, horses galloping in the field. What on earth are those things? Thought Sniffy. Then he kept on walking past the horses and he looked up into the trees and he saw in the trees strange black animals that were making this sound. Caw, caw, caw. Can you do that? Caw, caw, caw. Crows. Sniffy had never seen crows before. He'd seen little birds in the city, but not big black crows. So he walked around the tree with the crows in, and he walked further towards some mountains. Eventually, in the distance, he heard, "Meh! Meh! What on earth is that?" thought Sniffy. "Bah!" Can you do it? Bah! Bah! Sheep. He'd never seen sheep before. He didn't know what they were. But then he did hear a sound he was familiar with, a sound he'd heard lots before. It was a ruff, 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 ruff. That's right, another dog. And down the hill came a great big sheepdog. He ran towards Sniffy and said, "Hello, have you come to help?" "What do you mean?" said Sniffy. "Well, I'm rounding up these sheep. That's my job. Can you help me?" Sure, thought Sniffy. He'd never rounded up sheep before. So him and the sheepdog spent the rest of the afternoon rounding up the sheep. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard sheepdogs rounding up sheep before, but it's a very noisy business because every time the dogs go ruff, ruff, the sheep say, that's right, bah. So let's practice that. When I go ruff, ruff, you have to say bah. You ready? Ruff, ruff, bah. Ruff, ruff, bah. Ruff, ruff, bah. That's right. Ruff, ruff, bah all day long. Ruff, ruff. Ruff, ruff. Ruff, ruff. Ruff, ruff. Ruff, ruff. Ruff, ruff. Ruff, ruff, bah all day long, until the sun started to go down behind the hills and the two dogs were very tired. "Would you like to come back to my farm for something to eat?" said the sheepdog. "Oh yes, please," said Sniffy. So the two friends went back along a country path to the farm where the sheepdog lived. When the farmer saw them coming in, he put down two big bowls of food and said, "Hello, who's your new friend?" The two dogs ate up all their food and then they went into the farmyard kitchen where they curled up beside a big log fire. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen or been near a big log fire before, but when logs are burning on a fire, they make a very strange sound. They all crackle and pop, a bit like if we clapped our hands. Remember we practiced earlier? So, do that. They curled up in front of the big, cosy log fire, and the sheepdog fell fast asleep. But Sniffy couldn't sleep. He looked around and saw that it was a strange place and he wasn't used to it. Outside, it was getting dark and he could hear an owl going, "Toot-toot." What's that? thought Sniffy. He heard the wind in the trees going, "What's that?" he thought. And then he started to think of his cosy little basket bed at home and the lovely old lady who looked after him so well. And he thought, she'll be worried about me and I miss my basket. And poor Sniffy started to feel a little bit sad. Well, it's okay to feel sad sometimes, isn't it? Everyone feels sad sometimes. But when you feel sad, it's a really good idea to share your sadness with someone, to tell someone about it. That sometimes makes you feel better. So in the morning, that's just what Sniffy did. He slept for a little while, and while he was asleep, outside, it started to rain. Can you slap your knees with your hands? Just like that, not all at the same time. It rained heavily through the night, but then it got so cold that the rain turned to snow. The snow fell all over the farmhouse and the wind started to blow. It was a winter's night. And that meant when Sniffy woke up in the morning and said, "Hi, I'm feeling a bit sad. I miss the old lady and my home a bit, so I think I'll just go home if that's all right." "That's okay, I'll help you," said the sheepdog. When the dogs went out of the farmhouse into the farmyard, it was all covered in a blanket of thick snow. "Oh dear," said Sniffy. He started to sniff. "Can you sniff too?" The sheepdog started to sniff. Both dogs started to sniff, but they couldn't sniff anything. "The snow has covered up all the smells," said Sniffy. "How am I going to sniff my way back home?" he thought. "Don't worry," said the sheepdog. "We've also got big doggy ears, remember? We listen and see if we can find our way home using our ears." "Good idea," thought Sniffy. So they thought, what was the last animal sound we heard before we came home last night? "Sheep," said Sniffy. So they ran out into the field and listened. In the distance, they started to hear baa, 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 woolly sheep. "The sheep," said Sniffy. So they ran past the sheep and kept on going. Then he listened for the next thing. Can you remember what it was? High up in the trees, there were big black, that's right, crows. "Caw, caw," said the crows. "Crows," said Sniffy. "Let's go that way." So he followed the crows back into another field where there were lots of, that's right, "The horses," said Sniffy. "One more sound, I think." And he listened carefully when he passed the horses until he heard moo. The cows. They went past the cows until in the distance Sniffy could hear, that's right, the sound of the snee. "The railway station's right beside the snee," said Sniffy. "Snee? The sea," said Sniffy. So he ran up onto the railway platform. He turned round to the big sheepdog and said, "Thanks very much for letting me stay. Maybe you'll come and visit me in the city sometime." "Okay." And the sheepdog ran back home to the farm, leaving Sniffy sitting on the railway platform. It was cold that day, so he just sat and listened. At first, he didn't hear a thing, but then, of course, he heard in the distance, you ready with your shaker? The quiet sound of a faraway train. It got louder and nearer and closer and louder and closer and louder and closer and louder until the big train stopped in front of him. "This must be my train." The doors opened. Clunk. Sniffy jumped on board and hid under a seat. The doors closed behind him. Clunk. The whistle blew. And the train started slowly for Edinburgh. Got faster and faster. It seemed like forever the train was going through the countryside. Sniffy got up and looked out a window, and he he saw trees and rivers and hills and mountains and trees and rivers and hills and mountains. Eventually he crossed a big bridge and then went through a big dark tunnel. Oh, a tunnel, thought Sniffy. This must be Edinburgh. The train slowed down. And then the big train stopped. The doors opened. Can you do that with me? Clunk. Out jumped Sniffy. Whee! Onto the platform. And he sniffed his way all the way up the platform, under the barrier, up the hill onto Waverley Bridge, along Princess Street Gardens. He looked both ways and carefully crossed Princess Street. He got up to the side street, up the main street, round the corner to the door of the old lady's flat. He was nearly home. But the old lady was way upstairs in her kitchen doing her dishes. And Sniffy was away downstairs at the front door. He was too little to reach the doorbell. So how do you think Sniffy let the old lady know he was home? Any ideas? That's right. He used his voice. He barked as loud as he could. Can you do that with me? Ruff, ruff, ruff. Not loud enough. The old lady didn't hear him. He had to bark even louder. Ruff, ruff, ruff. Still didn't hear him, so he had to bark really, really loud. Can you help him? Ruff, 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 ruff. Eventually, the old lady heard the sound. She came down the stairs, opened the front door, and there was Sniffy, straight in front of her. Ruff, said Sniffy. Where on earth have you been? Said the old lady. Sniffy didn't say anything. He just ran upstairs, ran into the kitchen, got into his lovely comfy basket bed. He turned around 3 times, because that's what dogs do, isn't it? He curled up and went fast asleep. The end. Hope you liked that story. And if you did like it, maybe you could make me a drawing if you get some time this week. Maybe you could use your imagination to draw some of the things you saw in your head when I was telling you the story. Maybe you could draw the farmhouse, or the 2 dogs chasing the sheep, or Sniffy waiting for the train, or even Sniffy sniffing his way around Edinburgh to find his way to the train station. So, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.